The state of Vermont is home to more than 100 covered bridges, conjuring romantic thoughts of foliage, scenic drives, and spirits. Cape Cod storyteller Jenny Lee returns with a haunting new tale.
It's the perfect time of year for ghost stories. So today, I thought I'd tell you one very near and dear to my heart, because this ghost story is true, and it happened to me. Now, I'm called the Cape Cod Storyteller, but this story doesn't take place here on the Cape. It's a bit farther north, Vermont. Precisely a little town called Stowe, where for as long as I can remember, my family has always had a house. And as long as I can remember, I've heard the locals tell a story about a little covered bridge, tucked out in the middle of the woods, right under the shadow of Hunger Mountain. Named after the creek that it crosses, Goldbrook Bridge is the perfect picture of New England loveliness during the day. But at night, the locals say that the bridge changes. At night, when the sun goes down, Goldbrook Bridge becomes Emily's Bridge, and Emily doesn't like visitors. Some say the story starts as early as 200 years ago, when a beautiful girl named Emily lived in Stowe. She was the apple of her parents' eye and the sweetheart of the town, and she had suitors lining up around the block. But Emily was picky, and she had eyes only for one man, a stranger blowing through town. And nobody knew where he came from or who his family was. But the old folk of Stowe knew trouble when they saw it, and they warned Emily to steer clear away. Her parents forbade him from ever coming in the house. But Emily was determined. She'd find ways to sneak out and go see him. And it wasn't long before Emily realized she was going to be a mother. Her sweetheart told her everything was going to be fine, that he loved her and he wanted to marry her. He told her, "Meet me at Goldbrook Bridge when the sun goes down. We'll run away together, and everything will be wonderful." Emily's hands shook as she packed her bags. She was so excited to start this wonderful new world with this man that she loved. She slipped out, blowing one last unseen kiss to her parents, and went to the bridge. She got there just as the sun went down, and she waited. And she waited. As the sun slipped down beneath the trees, she waited. As the world plunged into inky blackness, she waited. As the moon crept higher and higher up into the sky, she waited, and she waited. Until finally, just round about midnight, Emily realized he wasn't coming. The whole world seemed to drop from underneath her. She didn't know what to do. She'd been abandoned, lost, shamed. She'd bring devastation to her family if she went home with them with the news. She cast around, her eyes looking for something, any kind of answer, and they fell on a rope that was coiled around one of the bridge's rafters. The next morning, when Emily's parents discovered her missing, the whole town went out to search for her. They found her there, after a couple of hours, hanging from the bridge. They took her body down, they buried it, and Emily was mourned. And for a time, things seemed that they would go back to normal. But then, farmers started saying that strange things were happening on Goldbrook Bridge when the sun went down. People would see flashing lights above the bridge, hear something like crying, and then things got very strange. People would find the bodies of animals lying at the base of the bridge, their sides raked open as if by claws. And some farmers even began to say that their horses wouldn't cross over the bridge at night, and when they did, they were met with something terrifying. A spectral outline of a girl that looked like Emily, that would approach carriages and carts, grab onto the sides, and shake it with a demonic strength. The farmers who saw this apparition said, whoever it was Her features were always twisted in a scowl of rage. People began to whisper that Emily never left that bridge, and that she was still angry over what had happened to her. I first heard this story when I was 12. And like any stupid 12-year-old who hears that there's a ghost-haunted bridge in their town, I begged my mother to take me there at night. One day, she finally agreed, and she drove me and my friend Kristen up to the bridge just as the sun went down. It seemed like the bridge was pulling the darkness of the woods around it like a cloak. And I felt this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. I suppose it was just fear, but at the time it seemed like something deeper, something warning me I needed to get away. But I'd come all that way. I couldn't admit to Kristen and my mother that I was scared, but when it came time to get out of the car, I couldn't do it. Kristen and my mother both decided to get out and take a look around, but I refused. I couldn't get out of the back. They left. Took a few steps away. I grabbed a blanket from the bottom of the car and I covered myself over and I hid. I could hear their footsteps crunching over the dead leaves as they walked further and further from the car. And then it was just me, alone, in the dark and the silence. And all I could hear, except for that horrible, faint ringing that always comes with pitch silence, was the sound of my own terrified breathing. Those moments seemed to drag on and on forever. And then finally, I heard something. The crunch of footfalls over the dead leaves, coming closer to the car. And I breathed a sigh of relief. It must be Kristen and my mom. They're coming back. They're going to get in the car, we'll drive away, and I'll pretend like this never happened. Everything's going to be fine now. The footsteps stopped, right outside of my side of the car. But the door didn't open. I didn't hear Kristen's voice. Whoever it was, she was just standing there. I started to pull the blanket off to ask Kristen what was taking her so long, and then suddenly, BAM! A huge noise, a crash on the window, like somebody had taken their hands and smashed it onto the glass. I barely had time to wonder what on earth Kristen was doing when suddenly, BAM! 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 Again and again, like somebody was banging their hands onto the glass of the window, like they were trying to break it open. I started to panic. I thought, it must be Kristen. She's trying to scare me. I barely managed to screech out in a horrible, terrified voice, Stop it! Kristen, stop it! And then I heard, coming from the other side of the car, Kristen's voice. And I peeked out from under the blanket to the other door in the car where I could just see out the window Kristen and my mom, at least 30 feet in the opposite direction. There was no one else at the bridge that night. I got back under that blanket. I wasn't coming out for anyone or anything. And again, I heard it, the bang, crash, bang, like someone was trying to get in. All I could do was sit there and shake, terrified. I didn't know what this thing wanted or what it was. And then suddenly, it stopped. And everything was quiet again. The next noise I heard was Kristen opening the car door and sitting inside. And I ripped the blanket off and said, "Did you see it?" She looked at me confused. "What are you talking about?" "Whatever it was, something was crashing on the window. Didn't you see someone?" "No. We've been walking around for 15 minutes. There's no one here. It's just an old bridge." I fell silent. I couldn't think of what to say. Kristen and my mom both got back into the car. We started the engine, and we began to drive away. And I gathered what other courage I had left, and I looked behind me. out the back of the car, back at the bridge as it sank into the darkness, and I saw 1, 2, 3, very quickly, 3 bright flashing lights just over the bridge. I don't know what I saw or heard that night. I honestly don't know if I believe in ghosts. But I know this. You'll never find me on Golden Brook Bridge when the sun goes down again. When the sun goes down, Goldbrook Bridge becomes Emily's Bridge. And Emily doesn't like visitors.
Perfectly spooky. Thank you, Jenny. To see more from Jenny Lee, visit neststorytelling.org.